First off, I want to thank you all for the amazing support you've shown to the podcast. If you enjoy what listening podcast summaries, please consider subscribing channel. Here is a rundown on the savings expert. They're lying about buying a house. Tariffs will skyrocket your living costs, featuring Morgan Housel by Stephen Bartlett. Morgan Housel's book, The Psychology of Money, has had a profound impact on Stephen Bartlett's understanding of money.
Morgan believes that the book's focus on the psychological aspects of money is more important than technical knowledge. He's fascinated by how people think about money and the emotions that drive their financial decisions. Morgan thinks that the current tariff situation has the potential to be the biggest economic story of our lives. He explains that tariffs can be useful in certain situations, but the current blanket tariff imposed by the US is a huge mistake. Morgan uses the analogy of a diet to explain that just as all dietitians agree that processed sugar is bad, all serious economists agree that trade wars are bad. He believes that the true reason behind Trump's tariffs is not to protect American jobs, but rather to bring back a bygone era of American manufacturing dominance. However, Morgan argues that this era was unique and cannot be replicated. He explains that the US had a manufacturing monopoly after World War II, but this was short-lived as other countries rebuilt and became manufacturing powerhouses. Morgan also points out that automation has played a significant role in the decline of manufacturing employment in the US. He uses the example of a Tesla assembly line, which is largely automated, to illustrate this point. Morgan believes that even if manufacturing jobs were brought back to the US, they would not require the same amount of employment as they did in the past. He thinks that the focus should be on creating new jobs and industries rather than trying to revive old ones. He cites Tim Cook's interview where he mentioned that China is no longer the cheapest labor country, but rather a place with a high level of skill and precision in tooling and manufacturing. The impact of the trade war on the average person is unpredictable, but Housel suggests that if tariffs persist, prices of imported goods will rise, and some products may become unavailable. He also notes that the trade war could lead to a loss of trust in the US economy, which could have significant consequences for foreign investors. Housel is not concerned about a recession, not because he thinks it won't happen, but because he believes it's an inevitable part of the economic cycle. He quotes Adam Smith, who wrote that people work hard not just for sustenance, but also for attention and admiration from others. Morgan shares that many billionaires, despite having all the money in the world, still strive for more, often seeking immortality or a sense of legacy. This desire for status is linked to our evolutionary past, where having status meant having access to resources, food, and reproductive potential. Morgan shares the story of Harvey Firestone, who wrote about how every rich person he knew, including himself, would buy a house that was way too big, not because they needed it, but because it was a status symbol. This desire for status is still prevalent today, with many people striving for wealth and material possessions as a way to show off their success. However, Morgan also shares the story of Chuck Feeney, who made billions of dollars, but chose to live a simple life, giving away most of his wealth to charity. The conversation also touches on the idea that people often need to experience wealth firsthand to realize that it's not the key to happiness. Morgan shares that he's met many people who have achieved great wealth, but still struggle with feelings of emptiness and disconnection. The topic of tariffs and recession is also discussed, with Morgan emphasizing the importance of having a cushion of savings and being prepared for unexpected events. He notes that even a small amount of savings can make a big difference in times of uncertainty. The conversation also explores the impact of artificial intelligence on the economy and society. They discuss how the Industrial Revolution and the rise of technology have disrupted various industries, leading to job losses and the need for workers to adapt to new roles. Housel notes that the transition from farming to manufacturing was relatively seamless, but the shift from manufacturing to technology has been more challenging. Housel agrees, stating that the biggest profession on Earth, truck driving, is at risk of being disrupted by AI. They discuss the challenges of transitioning workers from one industry to another, with Housel noting that it's not as simple as telling a truck driver to get a job at OpenAI. The conversation turns to the topic of skills and education, with Housel emphasizing the importance of learning how to communicate and get along with people. He believes that these skills are timeless and can help individuals succeed in various industries. When it comes to making money, Housel suggests that his son should learn the value of a dollar by experiencing scarcity firsthand. He shares a story about writing a letter to his son when he was born, hoping that he would experience poverty at some point in his life to appreciate the value of money.
Bartlett and Housel discuss the changing world of work and how it's affecting men, particularly in terms of their role as providers and protectors. They note that many men are struggling to find employment and are turning to get-rich-quick schemes, such as crypto coins and meme coins.
Housel attributes this to a lack of self-confidence in their ability to earn a stable wage and provide for their families. The conversation also touches on the topic of testosterone and its role in financial risk-taking. He shares the story of Jesse Livermore, a stockbroker who became a billionaire multiple times but lost everything due to his inability to say, "That's enough."
Housel and Bartlett discuss their views on crypto, with Housel stating that he doesn't own any and believes that 99% of it is a joke. However, he also acknowledges that crypto has the potential to change the world, and that it's not contradictory to say that a new technology will transform the world without making investors rich. Bartlett shares his experience with owning Ethereum and Bitcoin, noting that he's never traded coins, but believes that Bitcoin is the safest bet.
While some experts worry that quantum computers may become strong enough to break Bitcoin's security, Housel notes that this is not currently possible with the technology available. He also points out that even if it were possible, it's not a guarantee that Bitcoin's value would plummet.
Stephen Bartlett brings up the idea that all assets have a shelf life, and it's conceivable that Bitcoin's value could decrease over time.
Housel agrees, citing the example of gold, which has been a store of value for thousands of years, but has still experienced significant fluctuations in value. He notes that many successful entrepreneurs and investors, such as Warren Buffett and Bill Gates, have built their wealth over decades through consistent effort and perseverance. Housel also discusses the power of compound interest, explaining that it's not necessary to earn high returns to build wealth, but rather to earn average returns over a long period of time. He uses the example of index funds, which can provide a simple and low-cost way to invest in the stock market.
Stephen Bartlett asks Housel to explain how to make the concept of compound interest more relatable to someone with a limited income.
Housel uses the example of a daily coffee habit, explaining that if someone were to save the cost of a daily coffee and invest it in an index fund, they could potentially earn hundreds of thousands of dollars over several decades. He notes that debt, on the other hand, is a form of financial slavery, where someone else owns a piece of your future. He emphasizes that everyone has a unique relationship with money, shaped by their past experiences and values. Housel touches on the topic of trauma and its impact on one's financial relationships. He notes that everyone is a prisoner of their unique past, and that this can shape their values and aspirations when it comes to money. He emphasizes the importance of understanding and respecting these differences, rather than trying to impose one's own values on others. This phrase can be applied to many areas of life, including money. However, this behavior is not necessarily a criticism, but rather a reflection of their past experiences and values. Morgan emphasizes that there's no one right answer when it comes to money, and everyone's approach is influenced by their unique perspective.
Stephen Bartlett brings up the concept of YOLO, or you only live once, and how it relates to money.
Morgan shares a story about a coworker who had $25,000 in credit card debt from traveling, but ultimately passed away at a young age. Morgan reflects that he's glad his coworker took those trips, as he had experienced more in his short life than many people do in a lifetime. This leads to a discussion about the balance between enjoying life and saving for the future. He emphasizes that the goal is to have the fewest regrets possible on one's deathbed, and that this philosophy can be applied to many areas of life.
Stephen Bartlett shares a story about a palliative nurse who interviewed people on their deathbeds and found that many regretted not living a life true to themselves.
The conversation turns to the topic of saving money, and Morgan notes that it's difficult for people to change their mindset and behavior around money. Morgan also emphasizes the importance of understanding how money works and taking responsibility for one's financial decisions. He compares it to owning a little slice of American capitalism. When asked which index funds he invests in, Morgan mentions the Vanguard Total Stock Market Index, which owns every stock available to buy in the world at a very low fee. He emphasizes that he's not making any bets on specific industries or companies, but rather owning a broad slice of American business. Morgan shares that the Vanguard Total Stock Market Index has yielded an average of 8–10% per year over the last 100 years, but notes that this average is skewed by extreme highs and lows. The conversation turns to housing, with Morgan discussing the societal problem of a housing shortage and how it's pushed prices out of affordability for many people. He shares his personal experience of buying 3 homes, but emphasizes that he didn't buy them as investments, but rather as a safe and stable place for his family to live. Morgan advises that people should prioritize freedom and security over making a quick return when it comes to buying a house. Morgan compares investing in a Vanguard index fund to buying a house, noting that while a house can provide a sense of stability and security, it's not necessarily a good investment. He emphasizes that people should prioritize their financial means and not take on too much debt when buying a house. Morgan also discusses the idea that renting is not throwing money away, but rather a viable option that provides flexibility and freedom. The conversation also touches on the idea of $3 questions versus $30,000 questions. Morgan explains that people often focus on small, insignificant expenses, like saving money on coffee, when they should be focusing on bigger, more impactful decisions, like where to live or whether to rent or buy a house. Morgan also discusses the concept of retirement, noting that it can be a challenging time for many people who struggle to find purpose and meaning outside of their work. He shares his father's experience of retiring and then going back to work multiple times, and emphasizes the importance of finding ways to stay productive and engaged in retirement. Graham's book, written almost 100 years ago, still sells well today due to its timeless wisdom. Housel warns about the dangers of rapid growth, using the analogy of a tree growing too quickly in an open field. While fast growth may be exciting, it can lead to a lack of durability and a higher risk of failure. He notes that companies that grow too quickly often struggle to manage their growth and may not have the skills to sustain it. When it comes to happiness, Housel believes that people are often chasing the wrong emotion. Instead of seeking happiness, which is fleeting, people should aim for contentment. He shares the story of his grandmother-in-law, who was content with her simple life and found joy in the little things. Housel argues that people often get caught up in comparing themselves to others and seeking external validation rather than focusing on their internal benchmark of what truly makes them happy. Housel also discusses the importance of being content with what you have rather than constantly striving for more. He suggests that people should focus on their internal benchmark and ask themselves if they would be happy with their life if nobody else was looking. In terms of the current state of the world, Housel believes that it's not as uncertain as it feels. He encourages people to focus on what they can control and to be prepared for the unexpected. Housel shares a personal story about how his values have shifted over time. As a young man, he valued travel and adventure, but as a father, he values being at home with his kids. He notes that this shift in values wasn't a change of mind, but rather a different stage of life.
Stephen Bartlett praises Housel's writing style, which he finds accessible and story-driven.
He notes that Housel's books have had a profound impact on his life and have given him a framework for thinking about money and investing.
Housel returns the compliment, praising Bartlett's ability to keep a conversation going for hours and his skill at what he does. Thank you for tuning in. Please subscribe, check out YouTube channel, and just remember, subscription is only £1 or $1 per month. Leave a comment or review. Until next time, happy listening.